Hey guys, tonight we glide under a pale moonbeam that dances across moss-lined stones as you trudge toward the distant silhouette of a Roman aqueduct. You probably won't survive this mostly because ancient mortar has a reputation for dragging unwary travelers into endless maintenance logs. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, post your location and local time in the comments so I know where in the world you're about to be lulled to sleep. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You step onto a narrow service ledge, the rough-cut salt cool beneath your sandals. A light breeze carries the faint drip of pooled water, echoing like distant raindrops in a cave. Above you, the arches of the aqueduct rise like ancient ribs against the indigo sky, each one bearing the scars of centuries' chipped corners, sticky patches of algae, and small repairs that creak under the moon's gaze. At its peak in the early 2nd century AD, Rome's aqueduct system delivered over 1 million cubic meters of water per day to public fountains and baths, plumbing the heart of an empire thirsty for luxury and cleanliness. You pause to brush away a clump of moss, recalling how you once smeared crocodile dung sunscreen on your nose to ward off sunburn. Remember that? It's less practical here, but the thought brings a sleepy grin to your lips. Fringe whispers claim that some repair crews carried little charms resembling faucet handles, carved from bone, believing they could coax stubborn leaks to seal themselves. You run a gloved hand along the edge of a channel and swear you hear a faint creak, as if the aqueduct itself is clearing its throat, ready to reveal its secrets. Torches flicker in the distance, casting warm amber pools that dance across broken mortar. You follow their glow breath shallow, aware that every footstep might send loose rubble clicking into the dark below. Definitely not the kind of clickbait you want at 2 in the morning. A speculator might confuse the spectators, the inspectors, with the fabrici, the craftsmen, but you know better. Spectators carry bronze calipers and measuring rods, gawking at every fissure, while fabri heft mallets and chisels, grumbling jokes about shoddy Roman engineering that are at least 2 millennia old. You crouch beside a shallow pool where water has seeped through a hairline crack, forming a tiny lake in the channel floor. The repair crew has already marked the spot with red ochre, a practice dating back to Vitruvius's treatises, where he stressed that precise leak detection was key to durable repairs. Historians still argue whether Vitruvius intended that ochre marking as a permanent notation or simply as a theatrical flourish designed to impress visiting magistrates. Your torchlight shakes as you laugh quietly at yourself. Who knew you'd be here, tiptoeing along an arched spine built by engineers who once measured gradients with nothing but gravity and a wooden water level? You imagine them humming camp songs about aqueducts, probably off-key, while hauling buckets of pozzolana up steep ramps like delivering pizza dough to a mountaintop oven. You can almost taste the sulfur in the volcanic ash they used to make mortar waterproof, a recipe still echoing in modern concrete. A sudden drip snaps you back. You crouch lower, ears straining. Beyond you, a Fabri's lantern reveals a trio of men hoisting a plank across a gap, an impromptu bridge they rigged in under a minute. Efficiency 1 jokes the original Roman startup, and you stifle a giggle that could betray your position to any snooty owl nesting overhead. Under the surface, calm you sense. Purpose, every compass straight channel, and every arch nursing cracks has been touched by these midnight mechanics of empire who keep Rome flowing even when the rest of the world falls asleep. As you slip past their work area, you notice symbols etched into the stone, graffiti of sorts, but not the cringeworthy hashtag tags of today. Instead, you see simple labrum symbols marking water quality tests, perhaps reminders to check for silt buildup after heavy rains. Fringe scholars debate whether those symbols were practical notes or ritual offerings to the nymphs said to inhabit the springs. You shrug and tell yourself it doesn't matter. These marks are part of the story, just like the torch-smudged faces of the men carrying buckets on narrow ledges. You exhale, letting the cool night air fill your lungs. The aqueduct hums quietly beneath your feet, water coursing through hidden channels like the city's lifeblood. In the hush, you feel a gentle thrill, an odd comfort in knowing these stones have heard countless footsteps, held countless conversations, and carried nothing more dangerous than water. So here you are, perched between the world above and the flow below, enveloped in history's soft embrace. One more joke lingers on your tongue about speculators and specitors trading Roman plumbing tips, but you tuck it away. Ahead lies the true work, surveying that weathered stone, and learning how those gentle-voiced repair crews coax life back into broken channels. And with that, you drift forward, ready for the next step of tonight's adventure. You slip past the glowing lanterns of last night's repair bonfire and arrive at a wider platform where the repair crew's night shift stands at attention. Their whispers hush as you approach, as if you're some spirit summoned by the aqueduct itself. Here you're not hauling mortar yet, you're surveying ancient stonework alongside specitors, the eagle-eyed inspectors tasked with spotting every nick, fissure, and weathered groove before a single grain of mortar is applied. You crouch beside a speculator who holds a slender bronze caliper, its jaws brushing lightly against the channel lip. He runs it along the stone inch by inch, muttering measurements in a soft Latin count. Mainstream engineering fact: by the late 1st century AD, Roman aqueducts spanned over 500 miles of conduit, siphons, and bridges to feed the city of Rome alone. These specitors knew every nuance of gradient and cross-section, because even a few millimeters of deviation could turn a majestic arch into a leaky sieve. Your gloved fingertips trace the same weathered grooves. You feel a slight cavity and undercut where water has slowly excavated the softer volcanic stone beneath the harder travertine. Floating beyond the torchlight, you can almost hear water molecules carving their own history book. A fringe rumor insists that some specitors carried tiny spinning tops dipped in pitch. If the top spun unevenly over a surface, it meant moisture lurked beneath. You gently joke to yourself that it's like using a seismograph made for ants. The speculator taps the stone with a soft bronze mallet, each tap echoing like a distant heartbeat in the silent night. You lean in, mindful of creaky timbers beneath your foot, and hear a brittle snap. He smiles and recites a phrase you'll memorize: caveat fissura, he says in a low voice. Beware the fissure. It's both a professional warning and a bedtime lullaby for history nerds. Nearby, a Fabri measures a worn arch voussoir by sight, comparing it to a wooden gauge carved days earlier. Legend claims that during the Augustan era, craftsmen infused their tools with crushed olive leaves to ward off rust, and whispers persist that a handful of those leaves still lie stuck in stone joints today. You half expect an olive-scented breeze to drift by, but instead you catch only the damp earthiness of the channel bed. As you move down the line, you notice another speculator holding a small leather notebook bound in dark goat hide. He sketches channel profiles with quick strokes, abbreviating each flaw in neat symbols. Mainstream historical fact: Vitruvius recommended in De Architectura that maintenance logs be kept near every major waterworks, some of the earliest technical manuals ever written. You imagine those wax tablets clacking in carts carrying notes on leaks to distant administrators. A soft cough makes you swing your torch toward a clustered group of archarii, the gate tenders who regulate flow during repairs. They're testing wooden sluice frames against the channel walls, ensuring the fit is snug. You catch one of them humming a melody that sounds suspiciously like a lullaby you taught yourself years ago. You raise an eyebrow. Careful, you muse, you might lull the aqueduct itself to sleep. One speculator crouches at the base of a collapsed arch section. He runs his finger along a curved edge that once formed part of an inverted siphon. He traces a hairline crack only visible under the lamp's glare. You slip beside him, balancing on a narrow beam, and extend your fingertip to feel the crack's depth. It yields just enough to promise trouble if left unfilled. Fringe scholars still argue whether those siphon pipes were made of lead or terracotta. Some insist a mixed material approach prevented catastrophic failures, while others argue pure lead allowed for easier shaping beneath arches. You glance upward at the moon, its silvery glow filtering through the arch. You recall an offbeat anecdote about a nocturnal vigil held by a Vestal virgin near this very span, chanting incantations to calm restless channels before dawn. You can't verify it, but picturing an ancient priestess in flowing white robes beneath this stone belly makes you shiver, partly from the night air, mostly from excitement. The speculator locks his caliper, pockets it, and stands. "We have 12 critical points tonight," he whispers, pointing to red ochre dots painted days ago. He marks them off on his notebook, 2 on the arch crown, 3 at the keystone level, 4 along the channel bed, and 3 at the buttress foundations. You count them in your head, nodding solemnly as though you too are sworn into the sacred brotherhood of aqueduct guardians. A Fabri steps forward, brandishing a small iron awl. He digs at a joint, prying out loose fragments to reveal fresh stone beneath. He encourages you to try, so you grip the awl's shaft and push it gently into an old seam. The grit of centuries scrapes at the arrow-smooth metal, sending tiny shards into the dust. You feel oddly proud. It's the closest you've come to time travel, touching stone carved by hands long since dust. You shift toward the arch's springing point. Moss and lichen cling to the crevice, hiding weaknesses. You wet a rag, wipe a small patch, and reveal unseen etchings, marks that look like tally lines. You jot down a quick note on your own scrap of parchment. Possible earlier repair records. Fringe whispers suggest these marks denoted the number of times a spanner crew patched the same spot. Historians still argue whether those notches were tally marks or decorative flourishes added by bored masons. By now, the chill of pre-dawn seeps into your bones. You notice a sheen on your torch handle where moisture from mist has settled. The crews begin to stretch limbs and rub sore back. Surveying is part meditation, part hypnosis, as they sync their senses with the stone. You're convinced they could chart an underground spring by ear alone, like ancient geologists attuned to subterranean whispers. As you stand to leave, the speculator offers a small scoop of pozzolana ash for you to examine. It's finer than dust, like powdered snow in miniature. You inhale a cautious breath and cough softly. Definitely not the kind of sneeze you want echoing across the aqueduct. You tuck the ash back. As he laughs quietly, calling it Roman fairy dust, said to help shipments home safely, though no record explains why. You step away, heart light with discovery. You've joined the silent pact of stone whisperers who map vulnerability before any repairs begin. Ahead lies the real work, mixing mortar and sealing cracks, but for now you savor the solemn art of surveying, where every tap of a mallet and scratch of calipers writes another line in the aqueduct's grand story. And with that, you drift onward, eager for the next chapter beneath these ancient ribs of empire. You step into the soft glow of a newly lit brazier, where the full repair crew assembles like performers backstage at a grand amphitheater. The spessitores lean against crates of tools, the Fabri heft mallets and chisels with seasoned confidence, and the Arcarii gate tenders stand ready with wooden sluice frames and leather buckets. You probably won't survive the camaraderie here unless you're ready to memorize at least half a dozen Latin job titles. "All right, everyone," calls out the chief speculator, his voice low and warm like warmed bread. "Let's run names and tasks." He glances at you and nods. "You're with the Fabri today. Grab a chisel." You hesitate for a millisecond, imagining ancient stone chips flying toward your eyebrows, but then slip your hand around a well-worn handle. Mainstream historical fact by the reign of Emperor Trajan. Rome employed over 800 full-time aqueduct maintenance workers organized into specialized teams to ensure water never stopped flowing to the city's public baths and latrines. You marvel at the hierarchy tours inspectors decide what needs fixing, Fabry artisans perform the repairs, and Arcari regulators manage water flow to protect fresh work from undue pressure. You draw a deep breath that tastes faintly of charcoal and ash, reminding you of that crocodile dung sunscreen prank you once tried. But here the scent feels purposeful, like incense in a temple of flowing water. A fringe anecdote insists that some repair crews burned oleander branches to ward off water spirits, angry at meddling with their domains. You shrug and tuck the thought away, muttering, "Water spirits and crocodile sunscreen, that's just Tuesday in ancient Rome." The speculator hands you a tiered leather belt laden with specialized tools, an iron mallet, two chisels of varying width, a wooden float, and a curious small copper trowel you've never seen before. It gleams under torchlight engraved with tiny laurel wreaths. Legend says those wreaths were a sign of imperial approval tools blessed by a praetor on his way to a gladiatorial show. You wonder whether that praetor was more interested in public spectacle than plumbing, but fringe scholars still argue whether those wreaths served any practical purpose or were purely decorative. You heft the mallet and test its balance. It's surprisingly light, as though someone swapped out its head with a block of dense pine. You tap it against a smooth stone block, listening for a clear ring that signals solid metal inside. The Fabri around you exchange knowing smiles. Your novice status is forgiven if you can hammer without denting the stones. A young Arcaria steps forward, holding an oaken sluice gate with iron hinges. "Water supply in Sector C is strong today," he murmurs, flexing his fingers around a leather loop. "We'll need to throttle the flow after sealing." You recall a lullaby about throttling that someone hummed back in Section 2. Funny how melodies stick with you in the dark. The Arcarius fits the gate into a slot in the channel wall, testing the seal with a handful of sand. As grains tumble into the bed, you realize this is their way of simulating water pressure, a hands-on version of modern stress testing. The chief speculator paces clipboard in hand, actually a wax tablet with notes carved into it. He recites the evening's plan. Secure tools and materials at each station. Brief each Fabry on target cracks. Close sluice gates to isolate sections. Perform preliminary chiseling and cleaning. Mix mortar at the central pit. He looks around, eyes glinting. Any objections? No one speaks. They've rehearsed this choreography countless times. You glance at a Fabry clutching a roughly carved wooden gauge. It measures arch curvature to within a hair's breadth, essential, because even minor deviations can cause water to pool instead of flow. Mainstream engineering note: Roman aqueduct channels typically sloped at a gradient between 1/3000 and 1/1000 to maintain a steady water flow without erosion. You pick up a bucket of pozzolana from a nearby stack. The volcanic ash billows in a fine cloud as you carry it. You cough softly and remind yourself, don't inhale the Roman fairy dust again. One Fabry jokes, "Breathing in this is the ancient equivalent of vaping, except it actually works." You grin and juggle the bucket like a circus act, careful not to spill any. The spectator nods at you and the other Fabry. "Let's move to Station Alpha," he says. You follow the line of repairers as they snake along the aqueduct, tools clanking like utensils in a midnight kitchen. Station Alpha sits beneath a half-collapsed arch, where water used to gush unchecked. Now the Arcari crank down a sluice gate, and water retreats with a groan, leaving a mossy skeleton of channel. You drop your bucket and kneel beside the crack. It's about the width of your index finger and jagged like a lightning bolt frozen in stone. A Fabra hands you a chisel with a flat blade. "Here," he says, "pry out the loose bits before the mortar goes in." You grip it near the end, wedge the blade under a flaking piece, and twist. The fragment pops away with a satisfying crack, tumbling into darkness. You wink at your chisel like it just delivered the winning blow in a gladiatorial match, while you work the spessitator's pace with measuring rods calling out callouts in a soft monotone. 4 centimeters deviation at 2.3 meters, one says, tapping his rod against the stone. Adjust your chiseling eastward. You shift a fraction too far and hear a terse chuckle behind you. Close enough for government work, someone jokes, and you laugh a joke that's somehow funnier when you're balancing on ancient infrastructure at midnight. A Fabry passes you a small vial of pitch incense said to disinfect fresh mortar. You dab a drop onto the cleaned crack and sniff. It's earthy bitter, reminding you of burnt pine cones. Fringe historians still argue whether pitch was added for its antiseptic properties or to seal microscopic pores. You breathe in deeply, trying to calm your racing heart. Stations around you hum with activity. Arcarii methodically open and close adjacent gates. Fabrici scrape old mortar from seams. Spexitors note every wobble in their tablets. You catch one Arcarius humming the lullaby again. Maybe it's some unwritten water chant they all use to stay focused. You wonder if you should learn it too, but decide better not to risk getting the tune stuck in your head. As the crew settles into a steady rhythm, you feel part of an unbroken chain stretching back centuries. Romans humming lullabies to water priests, blessing tools, engineers, noting tiny slope variances. You glance up at the arches half lit by torchlight and moonbeam and think, this is the world's oldest ASMR session. 3 soft yucks. Later, one about crocodile sunscreen, one about Roman vaping, one about government work. You realize you're exactly where you belong in the gentle logic of these midnight mechanics, where every tool, every gate, and every measurement whispers a story of keeping civilization hydrated. You rise, tool belt snug, ready for Station Alpha's mortar mixing pit just ahead. You give the spessitator a mock salute, and he returns it with a grin. And with that, you drift forward to the next stage of tonight's repair odyssey. You step off the mossy platform and find yourself shoulder to shoulder with the watermen. Stout fellows tasked with hauling heavy masonry and pozzolana sacks along narrow ledges. Their shoulders bear canvas slings filled with rough-cut blocks of tufa and barrels of volcanic ash balanced precariously like circus tightrope walkers. You probably won't survive this without learning how to walk in someone else's sandals, literally. Mainstream historical fact. Roman repair crews often sourced pozzolana from quarries near Mount Vesuvius, where volcanic ash mixed with lime produced a hydraulic mortar that could set underwater and resist erosion, a true game-changer for aqueduct longevity. You glimpse the quarry stamp on a wooden barrel, its faded imprint reading Pozzo Januarius, a nod to the January quarry where it was loaded. A waterman nudges you forward. Keep your back straight and step light, he mutters in a low rumble voice shaped by years of portering heavy cargo. You sling a barrel of ash over one shoulder, wince as its weight settles, and take your first step across a beam barely wider than a foot. You swear you hear the barrel whispering, "I'm heavy, buddy. Don't drop me into the abyss." As you shuffle along, the wind picks up rattling nearby scaffolding. A fringe rumor insists that some watermen sang sea shanties, borrowed from grain barges on the Tiber to keep rhythm and distract themselves from the vertigo. You hum a few bars of yo-ho-haul away under your breath, only to be greeted by a chorus of muffled chuckles from the real watermen. You balance the barrel's weight, feeling the coarse wood chips digging into your forearm. The ledge slopes outward slightly, an intentional design to shed rainwater, but a nightmare for cargo carriers. You shift your feet heel to toe, mind focused on not slipping. One misstep, and it's a long drop to the scrub below, definitely not the kind of plunge you want in your highlight reel. Up ahead, 2 watermen collaborate to carry a rectangular block of travertine, its sharp edges pressing through the canvas sling. "Hold steady," one whispers as they duck beneath an arch crown. You follow barrel, bumping your hip against cold stone. The block's straight lines look like a mesmerizing puzzle piece, but you know it's destined to fill a gap in the channel wall. Historians still argue whether these blocks were pre-cut at quarries or shaped entirely on-site using portable saws and chisels. Some insist that pre-cut blocks save time, but risked misfits at the repair site, while others argue that on-site cutting slowed work but ensured perfect alignment. You nod gravely as though your single barrel haul might settle centuries-old debates. You come upon a group of watermen passing dozens of small sacks of pozzolana down the line, each man receiving and handing off with precise choreography. It's a human conveyor belt moving materials like layers in an infinite assembly line. A Fabry jokes it's the original Amazon Prime 2-hour delivery, but only if you can carry 70 pounds uphill. You laugh so silently that your eyes crinkle in the torchlight. Your turn arrives. You crouch to lift a half-barrel sack, arms straining as you heave it onto your back. The burlap grinds against your tunic and you cough as a plume of dust escapes the loosely tied top. Ah, Roman vaping, you mutter, recalling the earlier joke. The waterman behind you shakes his head with mock pity, but you don't mind. This is the camaraderie of midnight mechanics. You stand and begin the traverse, mindful of a slender tree root that snakes across the ledge. The route looks innocuous, but you know better. A single trip over that botanical booby trap could send you and your sack tumbling. You step over it with exaggerated caution, prompting a waterman to quip, "Careful, you might uproot the competition." You grin. Wordplay is a rare luxury when hauling bricks at midnight. Ahead, the scaffolding gives way to a wooden ramp leading upward to the mortar mixing pit. The incline is steep, but a series of crossbeams provide footholds. You climb each step, a negotiation between muscle and fatigue. Above you can hear the steady pounding of mallets shaping stone, a rhythmic backdrop that hums in your bones. You pause to catch your breath, the barrel's bulk making you sway like a ship on a gentle sea. As you near the top, you spot an offshoot ledge, where a small shrine of sorts stands, a dozen shards of votive oil lamps arranged around a carved water nymph's head. Fringe scholars still argue whether these lamps were left by repair crews seeking divine favor or by local villagers thanking the aqueduct for returning after a long outage. You nod respectfully and toss a few ash-dusted olive pits into the shrine, your own impromptu offering. You reach the mixing platform just as the Arcari slide open a sluice gate, releasing a trickle of water into a shallow stone trough. Before you, the Fabri stand with shovels and a wheelbarrow ready to combine lime pozzolana and water into a workable mortar. A spessator leans over, nods at you, and says, "Good haul. Hand it off, then grab that shovel." You gratefully relinquish the barrel and swap it for a broad shovel, its blade gleaming with moisture. The current sluices through the trough, turning a swirl of dust into a thick paste. You plunge the shovel, stirring the mixture with rhythmic thrusts, feeling the cool grit against your forearms. "It's like making pizza dough, a Fabri," remarks Riley. "Just don't eat it." You smile and scrape a small glob into a wooden float, testing its consistency. It holds shape without sagging, perfect. A nearby Faber passes you a flask of diluted wine to rinse your hands, an ancient antiseptic, they say, and a morale booster. You sip it gratefully. Its tart sweetness warms you against the night's chill. The watermen settle onto nearby beams to rest their shoulders, trading stories of collapsed arches and miraculous godly interventions. One insists he once spotted a swan flying under an aqueduct arch, believing it to be Juno's messenger. You listen, enthralled by the mixture of practicality and myth in their tales. Your eyes drift back to the ledge where you climbed. You imagine the weight of falling barrels smashing the stones, and you're grateful for the crew's careful choreography. These men and women, though primarily men since water handling was a male trade, have honed their craft to a ballet of load and balance. You watch them breathe in synchrony, each step and hand off a testament to centuries of adaptation. With the mortar mixed, you join the line handing trowels and floats down to the Fabrici at Station Alpha. You pause for a moment to run your hand through the cooling paste, feeling its gritty promise of solidity. The specitor nods in approval. Good consistency. Now go seal that crack before the Arcarii open the gates again. You glance at the moon peeking through the timber supports, its pale glow now mingling with the lantern light in an ambiguous dance of shadow. You take a deep breath of humid night air and flex your shoulders. Ahead lies the mortar application where your work will join history's flow. One last waterman lifts his stone block from the mixing pit, balancing it on his shoulder as though it's featherlight. You laugh softly. Roman CrossFit indeed. Then shoulder your shovel and stride toward Station Alpha, ready to keep civilization's lifeblood moving through the gentle logic of midnight repairs. You arrive at Station Alpha under a hush that feels almost reverent, as though the aqueduct itself is holding its breath for the craftsman to begin. The channel bed here is scarred by time, small puddles glint like liquid sapphires in torchlight, and every drip hints at unseen fractures. You probably won't survive this without a keen ear and a steady nerve, because some leaks are as silent as moonlight on marble. You kneel beside a thin rivulet, seeping from a joint between two travertine slabs. The Fabri around you shine their lanterns at different angles, creating shifting glows that flicker across wet stone. Mainstream engineering fact. Roman builders relied on the capillary action of mortar to draw water into its pores, allowing seals to self-heal minor fissures over time, an early form of self-repairing infrastructure. Your fingertips brush the damp seam, and you sigh at the familiar cold sensation. A specitor hands you a slender iron probe tipped with bone. He calls it an auditor's ear. You press the probe gently to the stone and angle its handle toward your ear. You hear a faint hiss, like the breath of a restless spirit. Fringe rumor claims that some auditors used ostrich eggshell resonators, believing the hollow curvature amplified hidden drips. But scholars still argue whether these tools genuinely improved leak detection or simply lent theatrics to inspection rituals. Got it, the specitor whispers. You nod and trace the seam with your other hand. There's a subtle groove worn deeper by years of focus at this very spot. The Fabri have already scored around the crack with their chisels, defining the repair boundary, so the mortar will adhere firmly. You admire the neat symmetry, straight lines of tiny chips framing the flaw like a picture. Nearby, an Arcarius carefully adjusts a miniature wooden sluice, letting in just enough water to keep the channel half full. This steady trickle magnifies the leak sound, making it easier to pinpoint and adding a gentle hypnotic backdrop to your efforts. You remember the lullaby-like melody you heard at dawn's edge and can't help but feel comforted by the aquatic rhythm. You close your eyes for a moment, listening. Drip, hiss, click. You hear the stone's voice. Caveat fissura, you murmur again, letting the Latin roll softly off your tongue. It feels like a marinade of authority, validating every droplet you hear. A Fabri kneels beside you with a lantern illuminating the crack from below. He holds a small brush carved from boar bristle and sweeps away loose sediment. His motions are precise, almost ceremonial. You mimic him, flicking away debris with your own brush, and reveal a faint undercut where pieces of stone have flaked inward. It's a pocket that could trap water behind the repair if left unnoticed, a trapdoor for future leaks. You glance up at the arch crown looming overhead. Its silhouette is majestic but marred by visible patches of older mortar. Eras upon eras of band-aid fixes. You can almost hear the voices of past Fabri grumbling, "Next time use more pozzolana." Historians still debate whether such repeated repairs weakened aqueduct longevity or simply extended it by preventing total collapse. The chief specitor steps close, pointing at a narrow fracture branching off the main crack. Secondary fissure, he notes. makes it tricky two tracks to seal. He hands you a leather pouch containing a pinch of crushed pine resin. For fringe strengthening, he winks. You stir the resin into your mind's cauldron of odd facts. Pine resin in Roman mortar, a detail that some suggest boosted elasticity, though mainstream builders frowned upon it for inconsistent bonding. You gather a small handful of the hydraulic mortar mix, lime pozzolana, fine sand, in a wooden bowl. The grainy blend smells of ash and earth. You scoop a dollop onto a wooden float and press it into the primary crack, forcing the mortar deep into the heart of the fissure. The material oozes into every nook, sealing the undercut with a steady pressure that feels oddly satisfying. You stroke the surface smooth with the float's flat side, creating a seamless patch that catches torchlight like wet clay. While you work the arcari, adjust the sluice again, raising the water level inch by inch. You hold your breath as droplets run over your finished patch. A hush falls, then miraculously the seeping stops. The water puddles, instead behind the repair, forming a small controlled lake. You exhale, and the fabric behind you applaud with muted clinks of trowels against stone. "Good as new one, Faber," I murmurs. The species nods, breaking into a rare grin that lights up his soot-streaked face. "Not bad for your first leak seal," he says. You feel a surge of pride. You've joined the ranks of those who coax broken stone back to life. A fringe anecdote drifts your way. Supposedly armed guards once shadowed these crews at night to prevent saboteurs from reopening sealed leaks, an early tale of industrial espionage. Scholars still argue whether such sabotage was widespread or simply tall tales to make routine work seem more epic. The arcarii smoothly close the sluice gate, redirecting water to the next section awaiting repair. You kick off muddy sandals and stretch your cramped knees, reveling in the soft echo of dripping water, now muffled by your handiwork. The channel ahead glimmers, awaiting the next artisan touch. For now, you savor the hush of Station Alpha, where leak and repair have found a truce beneath the calm moonlight. You rise, hands dusted with fine mortar, ready to follow the crew onward to the next crack, the next challenge. In this gentle world of stone and water, each repaired leak is a quiet victory, a whispered testament to the enduring logic of Roman ingenuity. You step off the gently rippling pool and follow the filas of torchlight toward a broader span where channel walls gleam with residual moisture. Here the fabrici prepare to clean and prep surfaces before any mortar goes in. You probably won't survive this without mastering the art of tidy chiseling and judicious scrubbing, because a sloppy underlayer means a cracked overlay by dawn's light. You crouch beside a Fabri wielding a short-handled hammer and a sturdy, cold chisel. He points to a patch of green-black moss clinging to the joint between two travertine slabs. "Moss and silt are our enemies," he murmurs, voice soft yet sharp like the chisel's blade. "They break the bond." Mainstream historical fact. Romans often built aqueducts with waterproof plaster layers to resist moss growth, but those layers eroded over time, leaving moss to find purchase in every crevice. You grip a bristle brush carved from boar hair and gently sweep silt from the stone face. Tiny grains scatter like stardust on the torch-lit surface, revealing the pale stone beneath. The Fabri beside you pats a swab dipped in vinegar solution, a supposed cleaning agent recommended by Pliny the Elder. He glides the swab over the stone, and you can almost taste the sharp tang as the acid breaks down stubborn residues. Fringe sources still argue whether vinegar was truly used in large-scale masonry, or if it was simply a medicinal anecdote repurposed by later scribes to spice up treatises. Once the moss is cleared, the Fabri switches to his hammer and chisel. He positions the chisel at a shallow angle, tapping gently to lift any loose veneer of stone. You mimic his movements, feeling each tap transfer energy through your arm into the blade's edge. Shards of stone scatter, falling into the pool below with soft plinks. You catch one between finger and thumb, a tiny fragment etched with mineral veins that look like a miniature river delta frozen in time. Nearby, a spessator kneels, caliper in hand, measuring the newly exposed surface. He murmurs numbers under his breath, scribbling notes on a wax tablet. Surface flatness within 3 millimeters, he announces, satisfied. You nod, wiping sweat from your brow. Though the night air remains cool, the physical effort warms you from the inside. An Arcarius arrives with a bucket of fresh water, dipping a rag into it and handing it to you. You dab the cleaned area to test for residual debris. Any speck of grit could create a micro gap under the new mortar. You tilt your head, inspecting under torchlight. The stone now gleams smooth and ready for sealing. You feel a quiet pride these minutes of cleaning determine whether tomorrow's fountain bursts or trickles. At your elbow, another Fabri works on a nearby arch cornerstone where old mortar peeks through cracks. He pries it out with a hooked iron tool, exposing clean stone beneath. Old mortar is like old gossip, he jokes, scooping out crumbly fragments. Gets in the way of fresh news. You laugh softly, the sound swallowed by the aqueduct's arching vault above. You move to a second joint where algae form a slimy film. You wet your brush and scrub in circular motions, pushing the slippery layer away. The Fabri circles behind you, wielding a wooden float soaked in vinegar to dissolve remaining organic matter. Acid clean, he calls it. Fringe scholars still argue if vinegar's acidity was too mild for masonry, or if Romans used stronger agents like poultices of fermented brine. You decide their debate can wait. For now, your task is the hands-on truth beneath your fingertips. With the surfaces clean, you endure a brief lecture from the chief spessator on cement bonding. He demonstrates how a damp surface helps new mortar adhere too dry, and the mortar absorbs water too quickly, too wet, and it fails to set. You practice flicking droplets onto the stone, gauging the perfect sheen without puddles. Think of it like seasoning a cast iron skillet, he says. Just enough oil, not a flood. You step back and admire the prepared surface. It's like a blank canvas awaiting the artist's stroke. The makeshift altar of aqueduct repair looks almost sacred in this moment. A Fabri whispers that some masons offered silent thanks to Vesta's flame before applying mortar, seeking the goddess's favor for fire-transformed lime and earth to bond eternally. Fringe whispers suggest these rituals were later inventions by medieval chroniclers to romanticize Roman piety. The Arcarii adjust the sluice gate so water laps just below the cleaned joint, keeping humidity stable. This trick you learn allowed the mortar to cure slowly reducing shrinkage cracks. Mainstream engineering insight. Modern reconstructions confirm that slow curing under controlled moisture conditions significantly increases compressive strength, a practice still used in heritage restorations today. Your torchlight dances across the stone as you sit back on your heels, admiring the crisply clean surfaces. You feel alive, connected to those who scrubbed these very stones decades ago, who watched the aqueduct swell and sigh under the weight of repaired sections. You recall the lullaby you once hummed, how its melody intertwined with the rhythm of dripping water, making these tasks strangely soothing. A Fabri offers you a flask of diluted wine, an ancient after-clean rinse to disinfect skin and stave off chills. You sip gratefully, warmth spreading in your chest. The spessator next to you murmurs virgin soil no longer, and you snort at the Latin pun, earth humor transcends millennia. Soon the call comes to remount your tools and follow the procession to the mortar application site. You rise, muscles pleasantly fatigued, and slide your binding belt back into place. You glance down the channel, newly cleared sections gleam like promises. Beyond them, dark gaps await your mortar trowel's touch. You step forward, toes close to the edge of the channel bed, and feel the subtle give of ancient stone. Ahead lies the moment where mortar meets masonry, where careful prep yields lasting strength. You take a breath, recalling that every sealed seam tomorrow's Romans will praise for keeping baths bubbling and fountains gushing. You settle into the familiar cadence of reshuffling tools, adjusting the wooden float's angle and stepping toward the next crack. In the hush, you hear only the water's soft passage and the echo of distant hammer tap sounds that lull as much as they signal purpose. And with that, you drift onward towards Station 7, ready to witness how mixtures blend into stone ceiling history, one crack at a time. You trudge onward, boots crackling over loose gravel until you reach the mortar mixing pit, a low-walled enclosure ringed by rough-hewn stones and flickering lanterns. Here the Fabbri reconvene with their shovels and wheelbarrow ready to transform raw ingredients into the famed Roman waterproofing mortar. You probably won't survive this without understanding the precise alchemy at play. One too many handfuls of lime or pozzolana, and your patch could crumble like stale bread instead of holding back the restless waters. A spessator stands atop a small plinth clipboard, rather wax tablet in hand, reciting the mix ratios in a soft chant. 3 measures pozzolana, 2 measures lime, 1 measure fine sand. Mainstream engineering. Fact Vitruvius codified this ratio in his De Architectura, noting that volcanic ash from the Bay of Naples produced the most watertight hydraulic cement in the known world. You lean in as he gestures to labeled sacks Podzio Januarius Calix Archie Harina Arena. You shoulder a shovel and scoop powdered lime Calix Arcis into a shallow stone trough. The dust rises in a pale cloud, coating your eyelashes and nostrils. A Fabbri offers a scrap of cloth. You press it over your face, feeling like an ancient dust mask. Fringe tales insist that some crews added crushed tile opus synonymum into the mortar for extra durability, though mainstream builders frowned on it as an uneven additive. Historians still argue whether tile shards were common practice or isolated experiments. Next, you shovel in pozzolana ash, its grainy texture like volcanic sand. You pause to smell it, a faint sulfuric tang mingled with earthiness. You think of that barrel you carried, once stamped from the January quarry, and realize how far these materials traveled to converge here under torchlight. The Fabbri around you gossip quietly. Some claim that the best pozzolana came from under the ancient port structures of Cumae, where volcanic activity mixed with sea spray to refine its qualities. You tuck that thought away. Tonight's mix, heed the Species decree. With lime and ash combined, you pivot to add fine sand arena minuta imported from riverbeds outside the city. You scoop handfuls, watching the golden grains cascade into the trough. A Fabbri jokes sand from the river Anio, smooth enough for a bathhouse floor, tough enough for an aqueduct. You laugh quietly, inhaling the mixed scent of earth and stone. Now comes the water, carefully measured from a nearby cistern. An Arcarius approaches with a wooden ladle carved from olive wood. He dips it into a stone basin and pours a slow, steady stream into the ingredients. Mainstream builders emphasized adding water gradually to avoid soupy mortar. Too much and the mix would slump. Too little, and it would crack under drying. You watch as the dry powders darken, taking on a slick sheen. You kneel beside the trough and thrust your shovel in, twisting and folding the blend into a thick paste. The motion is almost meditative: shovel, down, twist, lift, repeat. The Fabrici exchange satisfied hums their shovels, marking a rhythmic percussion that echoes off the pit walls. A fringe anecdote drifts through the air. Supposedly, some crews sprinkled tiny beads of resin from pine pitch into the mix to increase flexibility. But mainstream engineers considered it a superstition that compromised curing times. Scholars still debate whether any surviving Roman mortars bear chemical traces of resin. The paste begins to cohere, pulling away from the stone sides in ragged strands like taffy. You tilt the shovel, observing its consistency, thick enough to hold shape when slapped onto a float, but pliable enough to press deep into cracks. You scoop a lump onto a wooden float and hold it aloft. It glistens in lantern light, each air bubble reflecting like a tiny star. The speedster strides forward, treading carefully between piles of raw materials. He tests your sample, pressing it against his palm, then into a shallow groove carved in the trough's edge. "Good," he says, voice gentle but authoritative. "No dry pockets, no excessive slump." You beam. This is praise worth more than a legionary's eagle. Nearby, an Arcarius gestures to a second basin containing heated water, infused with crushed olive pits, a folk addition believed to accelerate curing. Fringe scholars still argue whether this technique was widespread or confined to certain guilds. You dip a finger in the olive pit water and test it, surprisingly cool with a faint nutty aroma. You shrug and wash your shovel in it, imagining it speeding the mortar's transformation from paste to stone. As the crew works, you notice faint echoes of distant hammers fabrici, shaping stones at other stations. The mixing pit feels like the heart of operations, pulsing with color whites of lime grays, of ash gold of sand, and the amber glow of lanterns. You inhale deeply, letting the swirling scents and sounds lull your senses into a gentle trance. A Fabri tosses you a small wooden trowel engraved with a maker's mark, two clasped hands beneath a laurel wreath. He explains it's a guild symbol, meaning the toolmaker's collegium blessed this implement for service in imperial projects. You trace the engraving with a fingertip, marveling at how art and utility intertwine in every detail. The speedster calls out, "Stations 7 through 10. Prepare for mortar delivery. Water flow reduced in 5, 4. You feel the sluice gates clicking shut in the distance, the gentle hiss of receding water signaling that channels will soon lie empty and ready. You pile fresh mortar into pottery jars, each portable bowl easily handed off to Fabrici waiting below. One jar in hand, you descend a short ladder to rejoin the repair line. The pit's warmth and dust give way to the chill of open air. You glance back at the mixing trough where the last shovelfuls swirl, then solidify into a seamless mixture perfect for sealing the Empire's leaks. You ready your jar of mortar trowel at the ready, knowing that in moments you'll press this alchemy into stone and watch water yield to human ingenuity. For now, you savor the triumph of blending earth, ash, and lime into a substance forged for eternity. You step back into the channel where a hush falls like a velvet curtain. This is where mortar meets masonry, where kraken seams surrender to human hands. You probably won't survive this without a gentle touch and a patient heart, because one overzealous stroke can leave a lump that diverts flow or cracks under pressure. You squat before a fissure 2 spans down from Station Alpha, where the aqueduct's stone lips gape like a waiting mouth. The Fabri beside you have pre-loaded wooden floats and trowels with the freshly mixed hydraulic mortar. You grip a small float in one hand and a triangular trowel in the other, feeling the cool heft of each tool. A speedster nods at you. This is your moment to seal the rupture and keep civilization's lifeblood humming. Mainstream engineering fact. Roman artisans knew that pressing mortar into joints at a 45-degree angle packed the material more densely, reducing porosity and preventing early water ingress. You angle your trowel accordingly and press the mortar deep into the crack's heart, feeling it squish into every crevice with a gentle resistance. A fringe anecdote drifts to your ear. Some repair crews reportedly added crushed seashells to the mortar for extra binding power. An experiment said to originate with engineers stationed near Ostia's harbor. Scholars still argue whether those shells enhanced adhesion or simply introduced salty contaminants that weakened the mix over time. You tuck that debate into a corner of your mind and focus on the task. You work in small sections applying mortar with meticulous strokes. Each dollop feels like a miniature sculpture, filling voids and binding two stone faces together. You smooth the surface with the wooden float, drawing long, even sweeps that merge repair patch and original stone seamlessly. Your torchlight casts soft shadows, making your work look like pale clay relief against a darker canvas. Nearby, another Fabri uses a small fan carved from reeds to waft air over the fresh mortar, encouraging it to set just enough before the sluice gates reopen. You mimic his gesture, slow rhythmic fanning that feels oddly like a bedtime ritual. You almost forget you're on a narrow ledge hundreds of feet above the scrub below. The Arcurii whisper down from the battlements. 1 minute before flow resumes. Your pulse quickens. You dab a final smear of mortar at the crack's edge, then run a wet rag over the patch's perimeter to blend any rough spots. A neat, barely noticeable seam remains an intimate handshake between earth and engineer. You step back and the chief specitor inspects your handiwork with a critical eye. He presses a finger to the patch's center. Tactile testing was the original stress test, and then taps it with the handle of his trowel. It emits a dull thud, not a hollow ring. Solid, he declares. You breathe out relief, pooling warmer than any hearth fire. The Arcurii call again. Flow in 10, 9. You wipe sweat from your brow. Mortar work under torchlight can feel like midwinter in a bathhouse sauna. Fringe tales claim that some Arcurii tossed sprigs of rosemary into the sluice channels before flow resumed, believing the herb purified water and pleased local nymphs. You ponder whether rosemary oils might affect curing and decide some rituals are best left untested. 3, 2, 1. Gates open. A soft roar emerges as water cascades back into the channel, rushing over the patched seam. You watch in fascination as the moisture glistens on the new mortar. It holds firm, no leaks, no drips, no ominous hisses. The stone seems to sigh in gratitude as water finds its new, unblemished path. A Fabri nearby claps you on the back. Nice work, he says, voice barely above a whisper. You offer a grin, heart racing with the thrill of success. This small victory feels like taming a miniature torrent, proof that gentle logic and patient craft can outlast even the softest trickle. You gather your tools, brushing off excess mortar and stowing floats and trowels on your belt. The specitor gestures toward the next fissure. Station 9 awaits your deft strokes. But for a moment you linger, savoring the hush after the water's return, the soft patter of droplets slipping over solid rock. You glance up at the arch above. Its curve dips gracefully, bearing centuries of weight and repairs alike. You recall an odd joke about crocodile sunscreen from Section 1, how silly it feels now compared to this tactile communion with stone and water. You whisper a quick thank you to that memory, a mental nod to callbacks that keep your narrative woven together. As you move on, the Arcurii adjust adjacent sluices, balancing pressure so fresh mortar cures without stress. You pass by a specitor who's sketching your repaired seam in a wax tablet. He murmurs, "Section sealed at EO217. Excellent finish." You give a slight bow. Validation from a master craftsman is worth more than any village festival. You step onto a wooden plank, bridging to the next repair point. Your boots make soft taps that echo like distant raindrops. Ahead, you see two fractures converging at an arch's springing point, Station 9's challenge. You feel a gentle thrill rise as you approach, eager to apply lessons learned and figure out new quirks unique to each stone gap. Behind you, torches glow warmly, casting dancing silhouettes across the arches. The rhythm of water tools and soft laughter creates a lullaby of purpose. You feel your eyelids flutter. This is no ordinary sleep aid. It's the song of ancient ingenuity, quiet but profound. You take one last look at the seam you sealed, smoothing your palm over the torch-warmed stone. It's an intimate moment, a handshake with history. Then you rise shoulders squared, trowel at the ready. The moon peeks through the vault as if approving your work. You inhale deeply, tasting the mingled scents of ash lime and fresh water. Your muscles hum with contentment. Ahead lies Station 9, then 10, 11, 12. Each. A promise of a quiet triumph, and as you step forward into the next embrace of stone, you carry with you the gentle logic that binds Roman aqueduct, repairs patience, precision, and a touch of levity to keep the night alive. You climb down from the narrow channel bed and find yourself standing before a broad arch foundation that looks weary from centuries of bearing weight. Below the springing line, the buttresses have settled unevenly, creating tiny gaps between the stone base and the ground surface. You probably won't survive this without learning the art of reinforcement because unsupported foundations can shift and send entire arches tumbling. Definitely not the bedtime story you signed up for. A spectator kneels beside the base, running a measuring rod along the gap's edge. Foundation settlement of 14 millimeters here, 12 there, he murmurs, sketching into his wax tablet. Mainstream engineering. Fact, Roman builders often used travertine fill and rubble cores to stabilize arch foundations, distributing loads evenly and preventing differential settling that could fracture the whole structure. You glance at the rubble pile nearby, buckets of broken tufa and trimmed stones waiting to fill the void. The chief Fabry beckons you forward. We shore up the spread with timber props and new masonry. He explains, his tone gentle. He points to a stack of peeled oak beams, robust, straight, and resistant to rot when kept dry. You heft one beam, feeling its solidity in your hands, and carry it into position beneath the arch's springing point. Wooden shores first, he instructs, then rubble fill and fresh mortar. You wedge the beam vertically between the arch's intrados and the ground, using a wooden mallet to drive it snug. Each tap echoes like distant thunder in the hollow undercroft. A fringe anecdote drifts by that some masons anointed their props with olive oil, believing the wood would slide easily into place and form a closer fit. But mainstream treatises warn that oil can attract wood-boring insects. Historians still argue whether such rituals compromised long-term stability or simply made temporary work faster. With props in place, you scoop rubble into a wooden hod and pour it around the beam's base. The angular stones lock together like puzzle pieces, resisting sideways movement. You press them down with a flat stone, compacting the fill until it refuses to settle further. A Fabry beside you uses a short chisel to trim a piece of tufa so it fits perfectly against the beam's foot. Precision, he says, is everything when the ground protests. Nearby, an Arcarius adjusts a small earth dam, redirecting groundwater away from the foundation zone. You remember earlier lessons about moisture control. Too much water here, and your new rubble could wash out too little, and the wood may dry and shrink, loosening the props. The Arcarius's gentle sluice work diverts trickles into a graded drain, preserving the worksite's integrity. Once rubble fill is firm, you step back and witness the Fabry laying small travertine blocks over the props, bridging the gap and transferring arch load onto the newly packed material. You kneel and help place a block, its weight manageable but its edges sharp against your palms. You slide it into a bed of fresh mortar, ensuring the joints are tight and the surface level. Mainstream building practice held that foundation courses should differ slightly in size, with larger stones at the base tapering to smaller ones higher up. This stepped approach dispersed weight and prevented slippage. You admire the taper in each course, marveling at how the Fabry maintained consistency without modern lasers or levels. A spectator steps in, placing a spirit level in early draft fashioned from a hollowed reed filled with water across the newly laid course. The bubble settles and he nods. Within 2 millimeters, he declares, "You can't help but grin. Your steady hands have contributed to a level straight enough for any Roman magistrate's approval. Fringe scholars still debate whether reed levels were widespread or limited to high-profile projects. Some argue that simple plumb lines suffice for most work, while others insist that emperors demanded precision apparatus on imperial aqueducts. You shrug internally. Either way, the bubble floats and the stones lie true. With the travertine course in place, you pick up a wooden float and smooth fresh mortar at the block seams, blending the patch seamlessly into the surrounding structure. You stroke each joint with gentle arcs, creating crisp lines that mirror the original construction. Your mind drifts to the lullaby-like water sounds, feeling a comforting rhythm beneath your efforts. Above you, the arch creaks faintly as weight shifts onto your reinforced foundation. You watch for any telltale cracks or shifts. Nothing moves, only the steady hum of water farther along, promising that your work will soon be tested by returning flow. A Fabri tosses you a small brush dipped in olive oil wash. He explains they apply a thin coating to newly laid mortar to slow drying and reduce shrinkage cracks. Mainstream restorers confirm that slight oil admixtures can mitigate rapid moisture loss. You dab the wash, carefully smearing the mortar surface with a glossy sheen that catches torchlight like molten glass. As you step back, the specitor gestures upward. "Let's test it," he says. The Arcari call from above gates opening in 3, 2, 1. A muted roar swells, water pressed back into the channel by upstream repairs. You lean forward, watching for leaks or shifts at your foundation patch. Water cascades through the arch, its weight settling onto the reinforced masonry. You see no gaps, no drips, no signs of movement. The arch stands firm, a testament to the combined logic of wood rubble and stone working in harmony. Your chest swells with quiet triumph. A Fabri offers you a flask of Posca, a vinegar wine drink favored by workers for its refreshing tang. You sip gratefully, feeling the acidity zinging your senses awake. The species next to you murmurs, "Solid and stable. Excellent workmanship." You tip an imaginary helmet in salute. A fringe tale drifts through the hushed group that Emperor Hadrian once rode beneath his aqueduct arches to inspect repairs in person, startling the crews and rewarding the best work with small gold coins. Scholars still argue whether the story is genuine or a later invention to glorify the emperor's hands-on approach. You laugh softly. Whether Hadrian came or not, tonight's work will stand as silent proof. You gather your tools, float brush hod, and step aside as the Fabri continue building up courses toward the original springing line. You run a hand over the fresh travertine, feeling its warmth and solidity. Below, the oak props remain hidden, their work blending seamlessly into the stone. Backlit by torchlight, the arch's curve looks triumphant, its base sturdy once more. You recall a joke from earlier about Roman CrossFit and think about how this reinforcement feels like building muscle under stone. You whisper a quick callback. The arch is your new bicep, forged by sweat and gentle logic. As the crew moves on to Station 10, you follow, stepping lightly over the rubble fill and past the oak shores. The path ahead reveals another foundation seam, needing care, and you ready your tools. The night brims with purpose. Each reinforced base is a promise that Rome's water will flow undisturbed. In the dim glow, you feel the slumberous lull of stone and water calling you onward. You tighten your grip on the trowel and float, breath steady. Station 10 awaits, and with it the next chapter of this midnight ritual where human ingenuity quietly outlasts time itself. You advance beneath the arches to a shadowed recess where an unexpected discovery awaits. Twisted tree roots have invaded the channel floor, wedging between stones and threatening to pry seams apart. You probably won't survive this without improvisation, because nature's stubborn tendrils can undo even the finest masonry if left unchecked. A Fabri shines his lantern, revealing roots as thick as your forearm curling around the channel stones. Mainstream engineering fact. Roman engineers sometimes used sheathing of lead or wooden plank linings to protect conduits from root intrusion, though these linings often succumb to rot or corrosion over time. You kneel and run your fingers along the wood-clad channel wall, spotting fractures where old planks have split. The chief specitor taps his calipers against a root. "This one's half an inch in," he mutters, tracing its path toward the mortar joint. Fringe scholars still argue whether crews typically burned out roots with heated metal or simply cut and treated the area with pitch to inhibit regrowth. You squint, imagining a glowing iron bar searing plant fibers in this hushed tunnel. The Fabri hands you a hooked iron awl and a leather pouch of pitch resin. "Prune and seal," he says. First, you insert the awl at the root's thickest point and twist, snapping it like a stubborn vine. The root yields with a muffled crack, and you withdraw the tool to fling the broken piece aside. Dust motes swirl in lantern light as though celebrating your triumph. Next, you scoop a small amount of hot pitch onto a trowel, its aroma smoky and piney. You press pitch into the gap left by the severed root, then overlay it with fresh hydraulic mortar, sealing both plant and stone in one go. The pitch's heat slightly warms your fingertips, a fleeting comfort in the cool night air. Nearby, an Arcarius adjusts a mini-sluice to rinse away loose debris, flowing a gentle current that carries wood fragments downstream. "Keeps the line clear," he says, eyes reflecting torchlight. Mainstream restorers confirm that minor scrubbing with water after root removal prevents organic buildup and reduces future blockages. You notice arcane scratches on a stone block, the marks of ancient graffiti or earlier repair notes revealed by scraping away silt. You thumb the scratches. They resemble tally marks interspersed with symbols of a trident. Fringe historians suggest these markings denote underwater repair cycles using Poseidon's symbol for waterworks. Scholars still debate their true meaning. You snap a mental photo, storing the detail for later intrigue. As you work, you recall a lullaby humming from earlier sections, its calming melody echoing in your mind. You hum it softly, steadied by its rhythm as you smooth mortar over the patched channel. 3 gentle trowel strokes later, the repair is seamless, root and crack now part of history's quiet tapestry. The specitor kneels to inspect your work. He presses a finger to the patch, then flicks water over it to simulate flow. "No seepage," he nods approvingly. "Unexpected hitch handled well." You bow your head in silent pride. Beyond you, Fabrizi chip away at smaller roots in nearby crevices, treating each with resin and mortar. The Arcarii patrol, ensuring no stray fibers remain. In minutes, the entire channel bed is root-free and watertight. A Fabri offers you a draught of Posca, its sharp taste prompting you to cough and laugh. Nature's challenge met you, say, raising the wooden cup. The chief specitor adds, "Even roots yield to gentle logic." You grin, savoring the phrase. You stand and brush your knees clean of grit. Ahead, the channel slopes toward a collapsed inspection hatch, where animal remains, likely rats, have clogged the flow. Station 11 beckons, promising another mix of routine and surprise. By torchlight, the aqueduct's stone walls appear patient and resilient, even as you witness nature's encroachments. You feel part of a lineage of repairers, engineers, laborers, and dreamers who welcomed each unexpected discovery and met it with ingenuity and care. With tools in hand, you step forward, ready to face Station 11 and whatever secrets its shadowy corner holds. The hum of water, now steady once more, accompanies your onward journey. You press onward beneath the arches until the channel narrows and dusk's hush deepens into nocturnal stillness. In this shadowed stretch, you stumble upon an unexpected challenge. Twisted tree roots have invaded the channel floor, gnarled tendrils wedged between stones, and threatening to pry seams apart. You probably won't survive this without improvisation, because nature's stubborn persistence can undo even the finest masonry if left unchecked. You kneel beside the largest root thick as your forearm curling around the travertine slabs. The Fabry shine lanterns at different angles casting dancing shadows that make the root look alive almost like a slumbering serpent. Mainstream engineering fact. Roman builders sometimes lined vulnerable conduit sections with wooden plank fascines, or thin lead sheets to protect against root intrusion. Though over time, these linings often rotted or corroded away, inviting the very problem they intended to prevent. Your gloved fingers trace the root's path, feeling its coarse bark pressing into the stone joint. A specitor crouches beside you, calipers in hand, measuring the root's depth of penetration. 8 millimeters here, 4 there, he murmurs in low Latin. You note his cadence, it's part measurement, part ritual, ensuring every incursion is documented before any tool strikes. Fringe scholars still argue whether crews used heated iron rods to cauterize root fibers, or simply cut them flush and treated the cavity with pitch to inhibit regrowth. You can almost imagine glowing metal searing plant tissue in this silent tunnel, but tonight you'll follow a simpler path. The chief Fabry passes you a hooked iron awl and a small leather satchel of pitch resin warmed by coals. He points at the root's thickest section and nods, prune and seal. You grip the awl's handle angle, its curved tip beneath the strangling root, and twist. The root snaps with a muffled crack, recoiling like a wounded creature. You withdraw the tool and toss the severed piece into a waiting bucket, its woody fibers dimly illuminated by torchlight. Next, you open the satchel and scoop a pinch of pitch resin onto a wooden float. It's hot enough to glow faintly, its aroma, smoky and piney. You press the pitch firmly into the cavity left by the root, filling the void with the sticky compound. It adheres immediately, sealing off the stone's pores and creating a barrier against future intrusions. A Fabry beside you hums a few bars of that lullaby you've come to associate with midnight. Repairs its melody drifted to you in section 2, and you hum along, steadying your hands as you work. While the pitch cools, you scoop fresh hydraulic mortar into the same cavity, pressing it over the pitch layer. You smooth the joint with a trowel, blending pitch and mortar so seamlessly that the repair looks like natural stone. Mainstream builders knew the pitch's resinous compounds complemented pozzolana's hydraulic properties, creating a flexible yet waterproof seal. But this practice was often omitted in large-scale works for cost reasons. Fringe antiquarians still debate whether the most effective repairs included pitch, or if pure mortar sufficed when applied correctly. And Arcarius lowers a miniature sluice gate, allowing a polite trickle of water to wash the work area. The current swirls around the patch, rinsing away loose debris and solidifying the bond between stone and seal. You hold your breath as droplets bead on the pitch mortar seam. There's no seepage. Relief floods you like a hidden spring. Behind you, a Fabry scrapes silt from another root-studded crevice, treating it with resin and mortar in precise repetition of your steps. Together, you restore the channel to its smooth, unbroken line, silencing the root's defiance. As you stand, the specider steps forward, placing a carved reed level across the channel bed. The small bubble quivers, then settles. Your work sits perfectly level. He nods once sharply, and you exhale, muscles unwinding. A fringe story drifts through the group that some imperial crews carried small crucibles of quicklime to scorch root systems using heat to kill subterranean growth. Scholars still argue whether such drastic methods damage masonry more than roots ever could. You imagine hissing white powder meeting smoldering wood in this confined space and decide that your gentle logic prune pitch mortar is both safer and more evocative of the care Romans prized. The Arcarii signal that full flow is returning. You crouch once more, wrapping a final rag around the patch's edges to remove smears. Then you step back as the sluice gate lifts and water rushes in with a muted roar. It glides over your repair like a silk sheet on stone, not a drop escaping. The aqueduct hums its approval. A Fabri hands you a flask of Posca vinegar wine mixture, favored by laborers. You sip the sharp tang, feeling warmth spread through your chest. The spessitor murmurs nature's challenge met without cruelty or haste. You smile, thinking that sometimes the gentlest solution is the most enduring. You cast a quick gaze upward. Moonlight filters through arch openings, dust motes shimmering in each ray. The capitulatio, the nightly round, moves on as you shoulder your tools. Ahead lies Station 11, where a collapsed inspection hatch clogged by animal remains awaits your careful hands. With mortar-coated trowel and pitch-streaked float, you step deeper into the aqueduct's embrace, guided by the unwavering logic that mends stone, tames water, and honors both engineering and environment under the gentle night sky. You round a gentle bend in the conduit and arrive at an alcove where a worn inspection hatch yawns open, its stone lid missing and interior clogged by unexpected debris. You probably won't survive this without a strong stomach and a systematic mind, because animal remains and sediment can turn a routine log entry into a gruesome excavation. Kneeling at the hatch's edge, you peer down into darkness mottled with shards of pottery and a tangle of sticks, likely remnants of a rat's last feast. A spicitor shines a lantern downward, revealing the skeleton of a long-dead critter still draped in a matted fur. Mainstream historical fact. Roman maintenance logs frequently mention clearing obstructive fauna, and some aqueduct stations employed slave laborers to act as professional nixionarii, charged with extracting blockages from vital conduits. You shudder at the term, and vow never to add it to your resume. With gloves on, you lean over and use a hooked awl to gently drag out the debris. As you extract the desiccated bones and silt, you recall your frog-chasing days as a child. This feels like a less glamorous version of pond scraping. Fringe rumors insist that some crews kept alley cats aboard service boats to patrol tunnels and eat vermin before they died, though scholars still argue whether cats ever ventured into subterranean cold or simply roamed above ground for scraps. You pass bones up to an Arcarius who lays them aside for later disposal somewhere deemed far from the sacred springs, as a few scribes poignantly noted in surviving tablets. A Fabri passes you a small brush to sweep away remaining dust and particulate. You scrub the hatch's stone lip until it gleams, revealing a carved inscription, L. Aurelius Magnus, Stationarius 142 AD. A thrill washes over you. This is a direct link to a specific caretaker from nearly 2 millennia ago. You trace the letters with your finger, feeling the shallow grooves smoothed by countless inspections. Nearby, another spessitor has already begun charting the clearance in his wax tablet log. He murmurs, animal removal complete. Hatch clear for reopening. Mainstream practice held that each station's log was updated nightly, then copied onto papyrus and sent to the Central Cura Aquarium office, a communication network spanning miles. You imagine messengers dashing across country roads, clutching wet tablets for fresh ink impressions. You tuck your awl into your belt and retrieve a small pot of scented oil lavender. The Fabri explain, used sparingly to mask the stench of decomposition during cleanup. You dab a few drops onto a cloth and gently wipe the hatch's edge. The floral aroma mingles oddly with damp stone and mortar, evoking memories of your grandmother's herb garden. You inhale and exhale. This is not the harsh tang of Posca or vinegar, but a soft, calming note that soothes your frayed nerves. A spessitor crouches beside you and points to a slender groove carved into the hatch's rim, an old water channel intended as a flush when the lid closed. It's clogged too, you notice, so water must have pooled and stagnated here for ages. You fetch a pointed iron pick and work it into the groove, prying out clay and grit until water trickles freely. Fringe historians still argue whether these micro-flush lines were original features or later adaptations inspired by North African aqueduct designs. With the hatch cleared and channel restored, you watch as a Fabry lifts a replacement lid, a heavy slab of marble inscribed with maintenance symbols into place. You guide it gently, listening for a satisfying click as it settles into its socket. The Arcarii re-engage the sluice above, sending a flush of water that tests the restoration. You peer through a narrow weephole and see water flowing smoothly beneath the lid without leaking around its edges. The chief specitor steps in and jots a brief note in his tablet. Hatch sealed at 0345. Flow check green. He snaps the tablet shut and passes it to you. Your turn to log, he says, offering you a stylus. You accept crouch and copy the entry into your own small wax pad: date, time, actions taken, and a brief note on the ribbed lion head carving at the hatch's corner, added by a later restorator, he whispers. You smile at the detail. Even in utility, Romans couldn't resist a bit of decoration. You close your log and tuck it into your breast pocket, feeling a sense of ceremony in this mundane act of record-keeping. Without these nightly entries, future crews would lack guidance on past interventions, leading to repeated mistakes. Mainstream administrative note: the Cura Aquarum maintained one of ancient Rome's earliest bureaucracies, complete with standardized forms and a hierarchy of clerks. It's easy to forget that grand arches and tunnels required paperwork as much as chisels. A Fabry nudges you and points down the conduit where torchlight flickers ahead. Station 12, sediment dredging and final flow regulation. You rise, brushing off your knees. The scent of lavender lingers faintly, a reminder that even in the darkest, dankest stretches, care and small comforts persevered. As you step away from the cleared hatch, you glance back at the sculpted marble lid, a silent sentinel over the canal's entrails. You offer it a quiet nod of respect, imagining L. Aurelius Magnus inspecting his own hatch centuries ago. You feel connected to that long-dead engineer, sharing a moment across time, as similar as your hands tracing stone and his stylus carving wax. Ahead, the channel widens under a low arch, and you can already hear the gentle burble of water meeting sediment traps. Station 12 awaits a final test of your surveying, cleaning, mixing, sealing, reinforcing, improvisation, and documentation skills. You tighten your tool belt and step forward, ready to complete tonight's odyssey through the gentle logic of Roman aqueduct repair crews. You follow the channel's widening corridor into a low-vaulted chamber where water pools and eddies around a series of stone weirs and sand traps. Station 12 is here, the final frontier of sediment dredging and flow regulation before water resumes its swift journey downstream. You probably won't survive this without patience and a deft hand, because too aggressive a purge can wash away fresh mortar in upstream repairs, while too gentle a touch leaves abrasive grit to gnaw at stones. Kneeling at the first weir, you peer into the shallow pool, where fine silt settles like morning mist. A Fabry hands you a long-handled scoop carved from olive wood. He calls it a scaffa limini. Skim slowly, he murmurs. Mainstream engineering fact. Roman aqueducts incorporated settling basins castella at intervals to allow sediment to drop out of the flow, preserving channel integrity and water quality for Rome's public baths and fountains. You dip the scaffa into the slurry, scooping up the grayish sludge. The motion is deliberate: scoop, lift, tilt, deposit into a collection basket, then repeat. Each scoop rids the water of abrasive particles that, if left unchecked, could scour joints and undermine recent mortar work. You work in steady rhythm, hum of water and leather rasping together in a gentle lullaby of labor. Nearby, an Arcarius adjusts a small sluice carved into the chamber wall, modulating flow so fresh water enters just behind the silt zone. Keep the trickle constant, he instructs. You nod and time your scooping to the wave cadence, letting the Arcarius's valve control ease the collection process. Fringe scholars still argue whether the earliest settling basins used wooden racks or simple stone ledges. Some suggest wooden grates slowed flow more effectively, while others claim grates fouled quickly and required constant clearance. As your basket fills, you kneel by a deeper basin where coarse sand settles. A speciator crouches beside you, running a finger along the basin floor to test solvust sediment depth. 3 centimeters today, he reports, marking it on his wax tablet. Mainstream maintenance logs note that cleaning intervals ranged from weekly to monthly, depending on weather, and upstream agricultural runoff, a testament to Rome's adaptive water management. You switch tools, a small hand rake with iron tines, perfect for drawing compacted sand toward your scoop. Each pass reveals clean stone beneath. You trace your rake back and forth, mindful of not scraping too hard and chipping the bed. A Fabry behind you hums that familiar lullaby melody, tying each station together with an almost hypnotic refrain. Once the sand trap is clear, you move to a narrow grit channel where larger stones and debris collect. A spicitor kneels, sorting through pebbles to check for broken mortar fragments, a surefire sign of 2 strong currents upstream. He holds up a shard of old mortar, nods gravely, then tosses it aside. You offer him a sympathetic glance. Maintenance is a part hope, part detective work. Next, the chief specitor calls, guiding you to a stone gate valve set in the floor. Flow regulation. He instructs the Arcarius to open the valve slowly, releasing a measured surge that flushes residual sediment through a downstream catch basin. You hold your breath as the water roars, swirling sand and silt into a holding pit beyond. You peer past the valve's opening and see grit-laden currents spiraling away, proof that your dredging was thorough. You recall a fringe anecdote about engineers adding crushed olive pits to settling pits during harvest season, believing the oil helped bind fine particles and accelerated sedimentation. Scholars still debate whether olive pits were ever used, or if the story emerged from culinary metaphors of pressing the harvest. You decide the myth is as useful as the real practice. Both speak to Romans' willingness to experiment. The Arcarii signal that the flow is returning to normal. You shift to a pair of small stone sluice gates, controlling water pressure ahead. These gates, wooden panels sliding between stone guides, allow precise regulation, protecting newly sealed cracks from sudden surges. Mainstream sources confirm that abrupt pressure changes were the leading cause of aqueduct failures, so these microvalves were critical lifelines along the line. You approach the first valve and slide a metal rod into its handle. With a satisfying creak, the gate lifts a fraction of an inch, letting water press against the channel wall at controlled force. You step back as a second Arcarius tests pressure with a handheld sluice gauge, a simple wooden board with carved depth markings. 50 millimeters at this valve, he says. Safe for fresh repairs. You nod in approval, feeling the water's pulse through the stone. Between scooping, raking, and valve turning, you've practically choreographed a water ballet. It's part cleaning crew, part silent orchestra, each movement playing its note in this nocturnal symphony. You flex your back and hear the steady drip of water escaping through tiny weep holes, a reassuring sign of proper drainage. A Fabry offers you a swig of diluted wine mixed with honey and herbs, Pliny's concoction for maintaining vitality. You sip, relishing the sweet tart flavor and the warmth spreading through your chest. The specitor at your side murmurs hydration and morale. Roman specialists knew both mattered. You laugh softly. Even in the depths of an aqueduct, small comforts count. As the final gate clicks into place, water flows evenly through the channel ahead, its surface placid and clear. You peer into the distance where torchlight recedes, revealing the faint arch silhouettes against the night sky. Each arch, each crack, each repair now lies protected by this careful sediment and flow management. You kneel one last time and run a finger through the water, tasting its clarity. No grit, no cloudiness. You exhale, a feeling of calm settling deep in your bones. Station 12 is complete. Your log entry will state, sediment traps cleared, flow regulated, all checks green at 0422. You rise, muscles warmed, and spirit steadied, ready to follow the aqueduct's path toward the final station's celebration of completed sections and the soft wind down of a night's toil. In this chamber of stone and water, you've witnessed how the gentlest of touches, skimming, sorting, sliding, safeguards the empire's lifeblood. And with that, you drift onward, eager for the modest victory awaiting at Station 13. You step into a wider archway where torchlight flickers against aged stone, illuminating graffiti-like scratches and the occasional scorch mark. This stretch of the aqueduct has a reputation, whispers, of deliberate sabotage by rival cities, aiming to throttle Rome's lifeblood. You probably won't survive this without a sharp eye and skepticism, because framing natural failures as nefarious plots can send magistrates chasing phantom culprits instead of reinforcing real weak points. You crouch beside a smear of red ochre paint that doesn't match the repair crew's subtle notations. A Fabry shines a lantern across the wall, revealing a crude arrow pointing upstream. "Looked fresh," he murmurs. Mainstream historical fact, imperial edicts from the late 3rd century AD record at least 2 official investigations into suspected sabotage, though most breaches prove to be simply unchecked cracks or flood damage, not clandestine tampering. You trace the arrow's curve with your fingertip, noting its hasty application in contrast to the crew's meticulous markings. Nearby, an Arcarius sweeps away dirt to reveal a hastily driven wooden wedge jammed between channel stones, a tool more suited for forced separation than careful maintenance. You peer at its splintered head, imagining someone slipping it in under cover of darkness. Fringe rumors claim that Carthaginian agents once infiltrated aqueduct lines to starve rival cities, prying open sluice gates and tossing chunks of lead to clog conduits. Scholars still argue whether any of these tales hold water or are simply colorful additions to Rome's legend archive. The chief specitor kneels beside you, tapping his caliper against the wedge. "Depth consistent with human force, not settlement," he notes. You watch as he measures the gap, 7 millimeters wide, 8 centimeters long, too uniform to be a product of shifting soil. He jots a quick sketch in his wax tablet, a diagonal wedge arrow mark upstream ochre smear. "We document everything he says. If there's a pattern, we'll catch it." You lean forward, slipping your hand beneath the wedge. It yields with a soft pop, sending a shower of dust into the air. You lift it out, holding the rough-hewn tool aloft. Its wood grain is fresh, unweathered by the channel's damp interior. You huddle with the spicitor, comparing it to the standard toolkit. "Not part of ours," you whisper. He nods, face grave. "Someone wants us chasing ghosts instead of real leaks." As you inspect adjacent stones, you notice faint scorch marks, blackened pock marks, where metal pocks might have been heated, then slammed against the wall. A Fabry kneels to examine them, running a scrap of cloth across the mark. "Iron oxide residue," he remarks. "They used fire to weaken joints before prying." Mainstream archaeologists confirm that thermal fracture was a known technique for splitting stone, used more often by quarrymen than saboteurs. But its appearance here raises eyebrows. You stand dusting your knees and follow a narrow path deeper into the arch. The aqueduct's vault opens into a small chamber lined with indentations like teeth marks where timber props once wedged a section apart. A broken chisel head lies on the ground, its blade twisted. You hold it gingerly. It's a standard Fabry tool, but bent beyond normal wear. "Purposeful," you murmur. "Bent to disable the section." A fringe anecdote flits through your memory, an account from a late antique historian who claimed competing Italian towns hired brigands to sabotage aqueducts during times of unrest, creating water shortages to pressure Rome politically. Modern scholars still argue whether these accounts reflect actual covert operations or were rhetorical flourishes to dramatize regional uprisings. You tuck the story away, worth noting, but not yet proven. The speedster gestures toward a shallow groove filled with sharp flints too many to be natural. He plucks one up, an arrowhead flint pointing upstream buried under debris. They left clues, he says, voice tight. Or maybe they wanted to be found. You frown. Sabotage can be subtle, but these acts seem almost performative, as if the saboteur sought recognition. Or a warning, you add. You kneel to clear silt from the groove. As water drips from your fingers, you imagine an enemy agent slipping upstream at dusk, carrying flints and wedges, brandishing paint to mark their handiwork. The hush of the aqueduct would cloak their footsteps, and only daylight's repair crews would spot the damage. It's a chilling thought, this silent war waged beneath Rome's feet. Next, you inspect a segment of channel where fresh mortar meets older stone. The border is crisp, but you notice a thin hairline crack deliberately run along the repair boundary. A Fabry shows you they undermined our fix before we even began. You press a fingertip to the crack, it opens slightly, then clicks shut when you remove pressure. You test it with the bone-tipped probe from Section 5. The hiss is unmistakable. Reopen every past repair, the speedster says. They targeted our weakest points. You rise, heart racing, scanning the dim expanse. The arches loom overhead, and you feel the weight of hidden hands at work. Yet you also feel the calm steel of purpose. Discovery breeds repair. As unsettling as sabotage is, it confirms that your crew's gentle logic, detect, document, reinforce, will outlast any malicious ploy. You gather the rogue tools, the wedge, the bent chisel, the arrowhead, and stow them in a leather pouch. The speedster adds them to his evidence kit. We'll report to the curator, he says, eyes steady. Let them decide if it's politics or prank. You nod, feeling the gravity of bureaucracy even in these subterranean depths. A Fabry offers a flask of warm, wine-spiced Posca. You accept the tang, warming your chest. He claps you on the shoulder and jokes. Nothing builds camaraderie like shared threats. You laugh, the tension easing. After all, maps of sabotage only make the gentle logic of repair shine brighter. Before you leave, you tap your trowel against the channel wall, carving a small plus sign next to the old ochre arrow. It's both a marker and a signature. We were here, we stood against the breach. The speedster nods in approval. Callbacks and records matter as much as mortar and chisel. You step back into the main conduit, tools clinking softly. The channel slopes downward toward Station 14, where completed sections are tested and celebrated. Ahead, the path widens. Torches glow more brightly, and you can almost hear the murmur of laughter and clinking cups as the crew acknowledges their victories. You feel lighter, bolstered by purpose and solidarity. As you drift forward, you allow yourself one sly grin. Whether politics, prank, or both sabotage, only underscores the value of your midnight ritual. And with that, you step into the next arch, ready to embrace Station 14's modest celebration of repaired arches and restored flows. You move into a grand span where the arches broaden and torches line the walls like silent sentinels. This is Station 14, celebrating completed sections. A ritual as essential as mortar mixing itself. You probably won't survive this without joining in the crew's modest festivity, because acknowledging small victories fuels the patience needed for the night's remaining toil. The Fabry have laid out simple fare on a flat stone slab, crusty bread, salted goat cheese, olives marinated in herbed oil, and warmed Posca in wooden bowls. A speedster taps a ladle against his bowl and calls feast before the final stretch, his tone more ceremonial than casual. Mainstream custom Roman work crews often broke bread together after major repairs, believing shared meals strengthened camaraderie and ensured smoother collaboration on subsequent tasks. You settle onto a low bench carved into the channel wall. Nearby, A Fabry cracks a loaf open, the steam rising like a soft mist in the torchlight. You tear off a chunk, its interior tender against your teeth, and spread cheese over it. The tangy flavor mingles with the sharp olive notes, and you close your eyes, savoring the simple luxury after hours of stone and water. And Arcarius raises his bowl in a quiet toast. To steady hands and silent leaks, he intones. You lift your own and echo, to gentle logic and lasting flow. You pause to echo that familiar lullaby melody under your breath, a callback, connecting you to every station you've passed. The crew murmurs assent, voices blending into a soft chorus that carries through the arches. Fringe tales say that some crews carried small amphorae of honeymead for late-night celebrations, but most workers preferred Posca's restorative tang. Historians still debate whether mead was a luxury too costly for routine operations or simply rare in Rome's urban workshops. You conclude that tonight's Posca, warmed by embers and spiced with vinegar, hits the spot. Between bites, you lean against the channel lip, listening to water trickle past repairs made hours ago. Each repaired seam now holds firm. Each arch stands buttressed, and you realize you visited nearly every station along this silent moonlit corridor. It's a minor miracle made possible by measurement mortar and meticulous craft. A spectator gestures toward the arches overhead. Take a moment, he says softly. Remember why we do this. You tilt your head back, admiring the lofted curves, the play of light and shadow, the unwavering line of stone reaching into the black. It feels like art more than engineering, a living sculpture in which water flows like a liquid sculpture under gravity's gentle command. You shift to share a hunk of cheese with the young Fabry who guided you through sealing your first leak. He grins, cheeks flushed beneath soot. You've come a long way since Station 1, he says, voice warm. You laugh quietly, recalling your moonlit introduction and that cheeky reality check about crocodile dung sunscreen. And I'm still here, you reply, which is more than I expected. The chief spectator stands gazing at the assembled crew. He clears his throat, and in that hush you feel the weight of his words more than hear them. Tonight you've upheld Rome's promise, he says, voice gentle but firm. You've listened to the stones, coaxed water back into line, and faced sabotage without fear. Each patch, each beam, each scoop matters. He lifts his bowl. For the Empire's lifeblood we remain vigilant. The crew echoes. For the lifeblood. You sip your Posca, letting the warm liquid settle as pride and fatigue swirl together. The crew begins to pack away bowls and scraps, stacking supplies for tomorrow's daylight inspections. You help gather empty bread baskets and wipe cheese crumbs from tool handles. Task by task, you return the workspace to readiness for another night or another century of repairs. A Fabry retrieves a small lyre and plucks a few gentle notes, weaving the lullaby melody into a hushed refrain. The music floats through the arches, a tender benediction. You close your eyes, letting the soft chords chase away any lingering tension in your shoulders. The spectator offers you a final flask of diluted wine, an evening digestive, he calls it. You accept its sweetness, rounding out the sharp notes of Posca. You sip carefully, tasting the night's labor distilled into flavor. It's a fitting farewell to the feast, a toast to the gentle logic that guided you through each challenge. You stand and sweep crumbs from your lap. The crew forms a loose line and begins moving toward the upstream entrance where service ladders lead back to the surface. One by one, you climb torches, bobbing tools, secured hearts light with shared accomplishment. As you emerge into crisp, pre-dawn air, the aqueduct arches stretch behind you like silent guardians. Somewhere beyond, water hums through the repaired channels, carrying on its eternal course. You close your eyes, breathing in the cool breeze and listening for distant drip and flow. In the quiet above ground, you feel the night's work settle into your bones, a gentle weariness and a deep satisfaction. You draw your cloak around your shoulders and look east, where the first pale glow of dawn awaits. The world will soon wake to fountains singing, and baths bubbling oblivious to the midnight mechanics who made it possible. But you carry the story in your memory, every survey, every haul, every seal, and as you descend the service ladder to share morning greetings with surface guards, you feel the gentle logic of Roman aqueduct repair crews pulsing in your veins. Ahead lies one final comfort, a soft bed and a dreamless sleep, rewarded by the knowledge that civilization flows on thanks to your hands and those of countless others across the ages. You trace your fingers along the worn stone of a final arch as you prepare to step into the gentle wind down of tonight's journey. This station is different, no new cracks to seal, no roots to sever, no log entries to make. Instead, you're here to survey the entirety of your night's work, ensuring every mile of channel, every carved joint, every patch of mortar meets the standard of enduring service. You probably won't survive this without a moment of reflection because true restoration is as much about honoring past efforts as it is about planning future upkeep. Kneeling beside the central channel, you sip the last of your diluted posca, feeling its warmth pulse through your veins. Around you, the aqueduct hums in a low soprano, water gliding over stone like silk. Mainstream historical fact: the Cura Aquarum maintained continuous inspections and annual overhauls, ensuring that each conduit section received at least one thorough check per year, regardless of apparent condition. That commitment to regular care underlies every task you've performed tonight. You stand and walk the length of the span, torchlight flickering across arch ribs and buttresses, each whispering its history. A specitor shadows your steps, noting any minor blemishes, perhaps a slight discoloration where moss might reclaim a seam or a faint gap where mortar has begun to shrink. You point to a subtle hairline fracture running parallel to one of your patches. He nods and murmurs, "Future schedule monitor this monthly." You murmur back, "Understood," and commit it to memory. Nearby, a Fabry inspects the map of red ochre markers you helped paint in Section 1, now surrounded by neat mortar repairs and fresh stonework. He runs a fingertip across one dot and jokes, "Are ghosts from the start?" You laugh softly and remind him, "Ghosts that now rest peacefully." Fringe lore suggests that some long-forgotten specitors painted their own markers in mischievous patterns, arrows pointing in circles, symbols of hidden jokes. But historians still argue whether any such prank survived beyond a single night's laughter. You concede that even playful marks tell a human story. You pause at a section where the arch's springing meets a buttress, recalling your work, reinforcing foundations back in Section 9. You press a palm to the cooled travertine, feeling the faint warmth retained from earlier torchlight. The stone is solid, the patch invisible to the untrained eye. You smile, proud of how gentle logic measured props, angled stone courses, careful mortar blending restored equilibrium. As you wander, you remember that sabotage at Station 13 and feel a quiet satisfaction. The rogue wedge and arrow remain in evidence, but tonight's comprehensive survey confirms no new incisions or scorch marks have emerged. The aqueduct stands whole, its breath steady. You think of that late antique historian's tale of Carthaginian spies. Whether myth or fact, your presence has warded off further intrigue. Above you, moonlight ripples through arch openings, mingling with torchlight embers to create a dusky haze. You inhale deeply, tasting the mingled scents of pozzolana, pitch resin, fresh mortar, and cooled tea remnants of Station 11's lavender oil. Each aroma is a bookmark in tonight's chapter. A specitor offers you a small folded parchment, a daily maintenance schedule scribbled for tomorrow's team. You accept it, knowing that night's work seamlessly hands off today's custodians. Mainstream administrative fact: Roman water officials maintained a rotating roster of crews to ensure continuity with detailed shift logs passed from one team to the next. You tuck the parchment into your vest, feeling the weight of responsibility and trust that such records embody. You crouch one last time to run your hand through the channel water, noting its clarity and steady murmur. No grit, no leaks, no saboteur's fingerprints, just the soft logic of stone and human care in perfect union. You pause, head bowed in silent gratitude to everyone named and anonymous who shaped this structure over centuries. Drawing a deep, measured breath, you step back and look upon the entire span from Station 1's moonlit survey to this sweeping panorama of arches. You sense a shift in the night's energy urgency has given way to calm precision to pause. A soft hum, more felt than heard, emanates from the water below as if acknowledging your part in its unbroken journey. You lower your torch, letting its flame taper into a gentle glow. The aqueduct's contours recede into silhouettes, and the world beyond the waking city, the sun soon to rise, feels distant. Tonight, you have walked the narrow paths between earth and engineering, restored the lifeblood of an empire, and woven every repair into a living tapestry. As you turn to leave, the specitor clasps your shoulder in a firm yet silent salute. You nod, cheeks warmed by a quiet pride. You step toward the service ladder leading back to the surface, each rung a symbol of ascent, from craftsmanship to repose. Wind down 300 words. Now, as you float upward from the whispering stones into the gentle hush of pre-dawn air, allow your thoughts to soften and your breath to slow. Picture the aqueduct's arches fading into mist, their sturdy curves blending with the pale light of early dawn. Feel the cool breeze brushing against your skin, carrying distant birdsong that beckons the world to wake. Rest in the knowledge that every careful measurement, every scoop of mortar, every whispered note in your log has contributed to something enduring and vital. Let the warmth of shared Pascha linger in your chest, mingling with the promise of rest. Each tool you carried, every patch you made, now stands silent and steadfast beneath the rising sun. Release any tension in your shoulders, imagining it melting into the valleys below. Let your fingers unclench from trowel and caliper, and feel the gentle pulse of calm that follows, purpose fulfilled. In this moment, it is enough to simply exist, safe held and connected to a legacy that flows ceaselessly like water through stone. Softly drift into a space where time slows. Allow images of moss-free channels, glowing lanterns, and quiet camaraderie to swirl like stars settling into place. Inhale deeply, then exhale fully as the world around you fades into a soothing hush. Tomorrow, the aqueduct will sing its gratitude in fountains and baths, unaware of the midnight mechanics who keep it alive. But tonight, you carry its hush with you, a gentle lullaby for mind and body. Close your eyes now and let a dreamless sleep cradle you safe in the knowledge that gentle logic endures.